PC here.
In here. One of the things we like to do in the foundation, as we talked a little bit last night about at the banquet, is to sort of cross-fertilize things, to mix together the reality and the ability of fiction and art to portray possible realities, to inspire imagination. And that's what this session is about. And we have some great guests who are you're gonna have some fun with this session. It's gonna be really cool stuff. But the bottom line is, if you can, as Howard was saying, basically, is if you can see a future, and if that future seems real enough to you, and then you can tie that in to the what you know about and are learning about in your life and your engineering, the things you're doing, then you can reach out and achieve that future. One of the points I've made before is that a lot of the people, one of the big legacies of Apollo that nobody has really looked at is the fact that Elon Musk, who's got SpaceX, and Jeff Bezos, who's building a rocket, and John Carmack, who's building a rocket of id Software, and all these other people, Bigelow, all basically are part of the legacy of Apollo. But along with growing up, watching Apollo and the space shuttle and that kind of thing going on around them, they were also able to turn on the TV and see Captain Kirk and Star Trek and see what a possible long-term visionary outcome might be of what they were actually seeing manifest in their lives. And I think it takes both mixed together. And I'm sure Howard and the other speakers will address it. So I want to introduce the chair of the session here. This is David Beaver, and he has got an interesting technology of combining lasers and light and creating an actual experience for people on stage to where they can immerse themselves and actually walk around and feel and see things. And I ran into him at ISDC for the first time, and we clicked perfectly. And I'm sure you're probably going to hear a lot of good stuff from him about what he's working on. So have fun in the session, enjoy it, and without any further ado, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ray.
Thanks, guys. This session is about space and the media, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that how the media reports stories of the new space movement is of critical importance. The public, the business community, investors, and all the rest of the world understands the movement and the industry. Sure. To many in this room, particularly those who grew up during the heyday of the first space movement of NASA and the Russian space program, it's just a little surprising that the media, and in turn the general public, is paying so little attention to this movement, the first one that offers them a chance to go themselves. Part of this has to do with the downs of NASA and the promises sometimes kept, sometimes broken, that have alternately excited and dashed our hopes. But part of it also has to do with the nature of the media itself, which, if you haven't noticed, has been going through its own revolution while we've been building ours. The internet, blogging, podcasting, social networking, and more have radically altered the shape of media itself, as well as such areas as politics and commerce, which it directly affects. The incredible acceleration of special effects have certainly had an effect on how we perceive space. From the early 1950s through the landmark 2001 A Space Odyssey to the phenomenal success of Star Trek, Star Wars, and dozens of other movies and TV series, this aspect of media has had a somewhat subtler, but no less powerful effect on how the public sees space. The role of special effects movies and TV played a critical but poorly appreciated role in the development of the first space race. With its evolution into new levels of realism and the increasing use of simulation media such as IMAX, 3D, and eventually the level of virtual reality that could literally bring space to the masses, the role of special effects and simulation is going to be unexpectedly powerful. In order to look at these and other aspects of space media, I've invited a varied and uniquely credentialed group of experts on space and mass media. It's been said of writing plays that the first act is nearly always more boring, so that the succeeding acts stand out by comparison and create a feeling of building. Therefore, I'll go first. I hold multiple US and British patents in the field of virtual reality for what many people have called the world's first practical virtual reality theater technology. We literally create a three-dimensional, full color, full motion, three-dimensional virtual world on a live stage and immerse live people in it, electronically interactive with it. I brought together a unique group of talents, which we call the Magic Theater Project, to use this technology and other simulation media to tell unusual stories and to convey unusual information. Our first area of interest is new space. In January of this year, we formed the World Space Center, which you can take a look at worldspacecenter.org. Let me tell you briefly about other panel members right now, because I think you should appreciate what's coming. Picking up the interest after my drier analysis will be Dan Curry, sitting right here to my right. While Dan's name may not be in this group, I suggest that his work is very well known and indeed may even have some impact on your own interest in space itself. I know more than one astronaut has said to me that it has been for them. Dan, for 18 years, was special effects producer and senior supervisor and episode director of all the Star Trek properties, movies, and TV from the Next Generation forward. In the process, he won numerous awards, including 7 Emmys. In addition to helping us understand the relationship of the world of space science fiction, visual effects, and real space, and especially new space, Dan will show us some examples of his work and suggest how this influences our understanding of space. Next, to help anchor us in the reality of space and media, is David Livingston, the host of The Space Show on the internet, beamed to satellite, and podcast, as well as on KKNW in Seattle. David is well known to everyone in the new space community, as have interviewed more than 500 of the leaders, movers, and shakers. And when you're talking about rockets, this has multiple meanings, right? Of the space, science, and business communities. David has a unique grasp on the pulse of the movement and how to communicate it to the general public. Our change of pace position is held by Mzuzu Onuki, who recently made media history by creating the first ever space fashion show, which was covered by the worldwide. Mzuzu is an independent aerospace consultant and the Asia liaison of Space Frontier Foundation. She's also director of Asian business development for rocket plane Kistler. How did the idea arise for this? How was she received by the media? And how can this approach lead to future coverage of the media and of the movement and the industry? Mzuzu will tell us. Next up is Howard Bloom. I had trouble getting this into a bite-sized, and you'll understand why. Howard is a unique blend of expertise that lends itself naturally to our crossover subject of space and media. Howard has been involved in science for 53 years. Channel 4 in Britain compared him to Einstein, Darwin, Freud, and Newton. Howard took a few years off in the 70s and 80s to involve himself in the world of mass movements and media. He created a publicity agency that helped guide the careers of a series of reasonable music stars, included Prince, Michael Jackson, Bob Marley, Peter Gabriel, and others. Having learned what he wanted to about the media, he returned to science and wrote 2 critically acclaimed books about the evolution of the Earth from, as he puts it, the Big Bang to your brain thinking right now. His 2 books, The Lucifer Principle and The Global Brain, describe how underneath the bloody survival of the fittest of natural evolution is actually a powerful creative impulse far beyond simple natural. This process has always linked the biosphere of the Earth together in a global development of life and complexity. While not everyone will agree with Howard's ideas, or indeed with any of us on the panel, you'll certainly agree that you've listened to someone with a powerful and incredibly informed intellect. Richard Godwin, that's cleanup. Richard is the current president of Apogee Books, which is basically the publisher of record for the old and new space movements. Like Howard, started with an engineering background and like Howard, learned his craft of mass marketing in the music business, but decided there was more money in rock and roll, working with such bands as Hawkwind, Nazareth, Thin Lizzy, and Led Zeppelin. He says his midlife crisis 10 years ago brought him back to his true passion, space, when he turned his music publishing company into a space publishing company, Apogee. Quite a team here. Each one of them is going to give you a unique perspective on how the media both influences, inhibits, and perhaps can be used differently to tell our story to the world. Alrighty, like I say, in order to bore you first, in order to get them up and ready for their exciting introductions, let me start. I'm here to deliver one simple message. However, because of the very nature of this message, it may be difficult to get. And this is neither an insult to your intelligence nor your level of information. It's due to a fundamental limit to human perception itself. What am I talking about? Just this. In the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen a revolution in the study of the brain-mind. The 90s were in fact congressionally mandated as the decade of the brain, skewing all federal science funding for a decade in the direction. The conventional wisdom among cognitive scientists is that we learned more about the brain in that decade than we had learned in the last century. One of the great findings of this brain focus was this: human perception is largely created in and by the mind from stored memory experiences. As several great cognitive researchers have said, as counterintuitive as this may seem to us, we are seeing mainly the past superimposed on the present moment. This finding accounts for many things that many observers, us included, have long noted. One good example is what I call the tenacious hold of the paradigm. This is the degree to which our previous thinking and beliefs so color our present experience that new ideas are incredibly difficult to shift to. Now, certainly all of us are dealing with the effects of the tenacious hold of the paradigm when it comes to space. But while everyone kind of understands this phenomenon to some degree, what this new research underscores very dramatically is that paradigms don't just rigidify our conceptual thinking, they rigidify perception itself. You see, not what is in front of you, but what your brain thinks is in front of you, shown to you through the use of internal models that you have created in the past. A further extension of this finding is that what we see in pictures, even moving pictures, things that we think are showing us a great deal of reality, are actually largely constructed out of our visual and other sensory memories of the past, from the past. This is not to say that we can't recognize pictures of people or places that we've never seen before, but that they must be rather similar to what we have seen previously in order for our minds to construct a good likeness. What happens if you don't? If you lack enough similarity, while we may recognize that what we're seeing is a picture, the level of information that we're absorbing from it is like a visual representation or a likeness, and is less like a visual representation or a likeness and more like a desktop icon. That is, we recognize what it represents behind it. A good example is the ubiquitous smiley face. There's a sense that its 4 simple lines actually create a face, but what they're really doing is evoking the brain's built-in face recognition tools, which cognitive scientists tell us are among our most developed abilities. After seeing such an icon, we may describe what we saw as a face, and may even uncritically feel that we saw a picture or a drawing of a face. The universal experience of seeing faces in clouds is even more familiar. If you take a photo of the clouds, however, you may not recognize the face that you previously saw, and other people most likely won't recognize it. So how does the dry academic idea about perception relate to the new space movement, you may ask? Good question, good question. I argue very strongly, and listen to this, because this may be unlike anything else you hear at this conference, but I suggest to you this has as much impact the new space movement will develop as government regulations and engineering principles. I argue that based on this most cutting-edge cognitive research, that words and pictures description of space that we are giving to the public are not communicating to them the level of information that we expect. That we, immersed in the movement, see things in these images that are not being communicated to people who have not been immersed in the experiences, particularly to those who've not been into space or have not immersed themselves in space information, which gives the brain a supply of information to put into our visual pictures. Let me be very specific about this just for a moment. What the cognitive scientists tell us is that not only is the picture I'm seeing of this cup based on previous images of cup, but in fact, if it were only previous images of cup, I wouldn't even be able to see that. What I have to do in order to see this as a three-dimensional, transparent object is I have to have touched it and moved around it in order to imprint enough information in my brain that my brain can construct the image that I think I'm just seeing out here. Recent research at the Duke Center for Cognitive Neuroscience, based on 5 years of NIH-sponsored research, tells us that even the image on your retina is inherently ambiguous until the brain puts all of this other information into the picture. That's how powerful this idea of the paradigm hold is. Fewer than 500 people have actually had visual and other sensory images of space. Many of the astronauts have spoken eloquently of how difficult and even counterintuitive the view of space is, and especially the Earth from space, and how difficult it is to. One of the great barriers is that the Earth does in fact not look like the pictures. Ask some of the astronauts about that. Some of this has to do with the size of pictures in relation to the size of the Earth itself. The frame around pictures also presents perceptual difficulties because it locates the image for the brain, again, telling the brain how to picture the image on the page, rather than letting our minds project it outward so that we have some real sense of its size. Another issue is the three-dimensional experience of looking through layers of atmosphere and seeing your entire text go up across the top of the screen. That was like magic in itself. Through layers of atmosphere and seeing the highly textured ball of the Earth and clouds. All of these elements add to the difficulty in seeing the Earth through pictures. But in the final analysis, all of these elements could be stored through sensory memories and hence seeing in pictures once you get into space yourself. So once we get out there, pictures will literally have a greater significance to us. These barriers, these cognitive barriers to the perception of space and the Earth also help to explain the powerful emotional and psychic impact that so many of the astronauts have described. Many of you may know of Frank White's book, The Overview Effect. Frank dozens of astronauts, including moonwalkers, and described a characteristic experience described by the title of his book, Overview Effect, that explains the surprisingly powerful effect. From the cognitive argument I've just described, the overview effect can in large part be explained by the sudden realization of space travelers looking back at the Earth that all the pictures did not adequately prepare them for the Earth's actual sight. The Earth really looked like its pictures. Is it any wonder that people are not grasping the reality of the space movement through the simple pictures? Our customary understanding of both perception and pictures does not really address this sudden realization. These new cognitive findings do. It's not surprising then that White, upon hearing these concepts described, said that this was the first sound explanation of the overview effect that he had ever heard. Finally, what does all this have to do with the new space movement direction? It's saying that if we really want to communicate, we've got to move past simple verbal and pictorial descriptions of space and the space movement. We've got to take advantage of all the new media techniques that are at our disposal, which will be represented and described to you by some of our panel members. Visual effects, advanced visual effects, 3D projection systems, virtual reality, a full use of the internet which allows an interactive experience with the audience that allows them to fill in the gaps in their own knowledge and thus make the pictures more real to them. These techniques, if really picked up and understood and properly applied by the movement, could create a sudden leap forward in the public's grasp and understanding of space. What is this worth to us? Our panel members will now help you understand some of the ways in which these techniques can be of use. Dan Curry is the first. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, David. Yeah, as David mentioned, for the last 18 years, I was a visual effects producer, senior supervisor for visual effects on Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. Other space shows I was involved with included the original Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, not the one with Buster Crabbe, I wasn't born yet, and other space features along the line. I'm a veteran of 118 feature films as well as a number of different television productions. And by way of introducing it, one of the things that we tried to do on Star Trek is it's really fantasy. It's unlikely we'll have warp drive that will ever be able to fly to Saturn in 6 minutes. But we did, in order for good storytelling, we had to compress the distances, so that's why Gene came up with warp drive. And but we tried to create a dream of space and a future where, as a species, we've gotten our act together, at least on our own planet, in terms of racism, greed, poverty, disease. And I think that was one of the underlying things that helped make Star Trek successful, is it painted the picture of a possible future where we are a successful species that relates comfortably to our own technology and our own proclivities. I brought should have sound, I guess it doesn't have sound. That's it. And I'd like to show you some stills now. This is George Méliès, and George Méliès is the father of the space epic, and also a lot of things in the language of film. There's a wonderful apocryphal story that in the late 1800s, he was standing on a street corner in Paris, and he was also a magician and a prestidigitator. He had a live theater that did kind of magic shows. And he was working with his hand-cranked movie camera, and it jammed, and he kind of whacked it a few times, and then started going again. Well, there was a happy coincidence, and when he started cranking it and it jammed, there happened to be a horse-drawn bus in front of the camera. When he got it going again, in exactly the same position, there was a hearse. And when he developed the film and looked at the movie, he became instantly aware that it looked like the bus turned into a hearse, and it just opened a whole world of imagination to him. So can we go to the next slide, please? So he came up, inspired by Jules Verne, with the idea, and it's a movie I would recommend everybody seeing, Voyage to the Moon. And it's very naive by our standards, but this was the Star Wars of its day. Just really wowed audiences. They're preparing, and of course the moon gets hit in the eye by the rocket and exudes this unpleasant viscosity. And this is one of the iconic images of visual effects. And he combined a lot of stage technologies, like a lot of the ships are flat props. Can we go to the next slide, please? And here we land on the moon, and a little door opens, and out of this two-dimensional flat live actors. Next one, please. And on the moon, there's this, I guess, early psychedelic vision of these attractive maidens sitting on celestial objects. Next one, please. And of course, there are selenites, or these creatures that live on the moon that evolved into the Star Trek insectoids. And here they're trying to prevent the travelers from Earth getting back to our planet. And next one, please. This is Leslie Bonestell. let's go back to I'll go back to Georges Méliès for a moment. He invented things, if you're not familiar with film technology, like the dissolve, the double exposure, and a lot of things that are the staple grammar of all filmmaking today. And Chesley Bonestell, there have been many influential space artists since then, but he was an incredibly important artist. And he developed things that were used both in movies and astronomy, and a lot of his imagination inspired people to be further interested in space by, next slide please, by creating images of what it might be like if you were out there and on these other surfaces. So this is one of his paintings. Here's one that became a conceptual design for a moon for a movie called The Conquest of Space. And he had this image of sleek rocket ships, and that the moon would be covered with cracked surfaces like mud. But the power of his vision and his imagery, I think, was an inspiration to not only subsequent filmmakers, but people that were real space explorers. And one more, please. Here's another one of his with the idea of multi-stage spacecraft. And one more, please. And this one is by Charles Kohlhase. And Charlie is a real space scientist at JPL. And this was one of his things that he with as a hobby, just seeing something going on Mars. And so here's a unique individual that bridges both fine arts and true space exploration. And Charlie was one of the people who did the calculations that allowed the Voyager probe to slingshot around Venus so it could get out to Saturn quickly. Some of the critical movies that were influential, Chesley Bonestell did a lot of work for George Pal, Conquest of Space, Destination Moon, the first version of War of the Worlds, and another critical film, Forbidden Planet, MGM's great epic starring Leslie Nielsen in his pre-comedic days, where voyagers from Earth find this incredible city done by an extinct race of aliens that is so technologically advanced it's impossible for humans to comprehend it. And that's the kind film was one of the reasons I work in the industry today, because it just showed what you can create on film that is such a powerful, overwhelming image of a world that we can't experience in real life. Then going on there, of course, the great work by Ray Harryhausen, From Earth to Moon, and Earth versus the Flying Saucers, all those great B pictures from the 50s. And then Gene Roddenberry, when Wagon Train went off the air, came up with the idea of doing Wagon Train in space, and that became Star Trek. And it gave Gene the opportunity to comment on the social foibles of our people by looking at it from the distance of both time and interspecies activities. So we could racism and make fun of other human foibles by, aren't they quaint, see those people with the two-sided faces, and aren't they silly by condemning each other because one side of their face happens to be black and the other happens to be white. Well, it kind of showed us what we should be thinking about in our own country. The relationship between real science and space and science fiction, the more real scientists learned about space, the more we were able to make our illusions of space realistic. Especially in recent years on Star Trek, luckily NASA and JPL are great fans of the show, and when we wanted to do alien planets, they would provide us with satellite photographs and other things that would lend a great deal of realism to it. When the Hubble Space Telescope started bringing back incredible pictures of deep space, we started using those pictures as inspiration for us to create all sorts of images in space. If you could go to the next slide, please. So here's the original Enterprise from the original series, and the next one, please. Here's the Enterprise from Enterprise, the most recent version. And notice the kind of nebulosity, as we call it in the background, is inspired by what real scientists get in their deep space photographs. Next one, please. And this is our enterprise over Earth, but this couldn't have been possible without the good graces of NASA and the team of astronauts who would provide photographs of Earth, and that's how we were able to create this with a high degree of what we hope looks like realism. Next one, please. And here's Enterprise zooming into a deep space nebula. Again, this was by images we got from the Hubble telescope. So there is a wonderful symbiosis between real science and science fiction, and we hope that some of our humble endeavors on Star Trek would inspire you to go out into real space and make it happen for the rest of us.
Thank you, Dan. I'm sure that evoked a lot of memories for a lot of folks here. Next up is David Livingston, the host of the Space Show, and the other day he regaled us with the history, his own history in the oil exploration business, in which he described how deeply immersed he was in the business world. So I think that's a good understanding. When you listen to his statements, it's grounded in a lot of business, true business experience.
Good afternoon. It's nice to be back. What a hard act to follow Star Trek. So, Dan, I have to tell you that Star Trek is in the Space Show, as well as everything that you put up there and more, because I grew up with all of this, plus the real space program. And if you hadn't been doing what you did, and Forbidden Planet wasn't there, excuse me, and Apollo in the real program, there would be no space show. So I am honored to follow you, and I thank you. And every space show has this in it, and there wouldn't be space if it wasn't for these people. We'd just be looking at it, you know, like our great ancestors. I wrote a chapter in a book that Apogee is selling. Howard has a chapter in it. Others here probably do too, Beyond Earth. And my chapter was about making space a popular goal in the United States. So I only have a few minutes to talk about that, but based on my 5 years of history doing the space show and dealing with the general public, I've come to a unique point of view of why there is such a gigantic disconnect from what goes on here or at ISDC or at an AI meeting and the people I meet at Safeway or on an airplane or in the airport or a movie theater while I'm waiting in line to go see a movie and we just start up. I usually wear Space Show logo wear, so they always say, "What's the Space Show?" I'm like a billboard for the program, and I'm always trying to promote it. So I can sum up this disconnect because the general public thesis is ask not what for space, but ask what space can do for me and you, and damn it, be specific. And the deal is they got kids in college, they got loans, they've got car payments, they're having a hard time paying gas bills, they've got mom in the nursing home, everything that you can imagine. And to say that space is about settlement doesn't connect even one single dot, and it's not going to get any message across. And to tell them that they have Velcro or medical tools or Tang is lost in the ether as well. To say that your communications, your credit card transactions, the internet, so much of our daily life comes from space doesn't connect to them either, because it is already there, it is an assumed given, and they can't make the quantum leap, or they won't make that leap from what exists today in their everyday life that they take for granted to that it's something unique or special. I grew up and there was no color TV. Probably a lot of you remember the first color TVs. They had to come out with degaussing machines, set up the color. You couldn't move a color TV without having them come back out and readjust all the color. We never took any of this stuff for granted. You know, the kids today, an iPod they take for granted, you know, with movies on it. So we're not connecting the dots. NASA doesn't connect the dots. And it's not enough to talk to the general public the way we talk among ourselves. They need and they want and they are open to knowing how they can connect with space. And nobody's going to tell them that or help them learn that. They're not going to get it in a school textbook in high school or college or middle school. They're clearly not going to get it from the New York Times or the Washington Post or the LA Times or any place else. Perfect people to do that. And we have to understand and see space from their perspective, not ours. We have to make sure that they understand that space can be, is, and will be an integral part of their life, a valuable part of their life, and an increasingly valuable part of their life. But like anything that is of value, it requires an investment, and it requires some development, like the home they live in. So energy, which is something we've been talking about here and that Howard talks about a lot, maybe someday space will make a huge difference in our lives for energy. My personal favorite is that I like to point out that during the Cold War, when we were all afraid of what the Soviet Union was going to do, excuse me, maybe what our government was going to do, we had astronauts up there bonding, being in peace, making treaties to save each other's astronauts in distress, keeping weapons out of space. The bottom line is space has been the only forum humanity has ever created where mankind has worked at its best in peace and in harmony. There is no other forum that mankind that has ever created that can have that track record. And that path is the path to a better Earth. And we have to tell this story and get people to realize that we're in our future by investing in a space program. But we have to make it personal. We have to show and bring it down to the lowest level so that they can identify with it. And going to Mars because Earth is going to get hit by an asteroid doesn't cut it, because they know they're not the ones going to get chosen to go to Mars. And furthermore, none of them probably think it's going to happen on their watch anyway. And so how do we find the way that turns people on to the individual benefits? The way I do it is I try to listen really hard to what they're telling me, because when they're talking to me about space, I find out from them in their own words what it is that they need, what it is that they want. And can I honestly, legitimately, and with integrity show them how space can give them what they need? I don't create a lie out of it, and I don't give them inflammatory rhetoric, but they give answer. And if they hate space and they're really negative and they say, damn it, we need to cure cancer, we need to have world peace, all the things that everybody likes to say, from within that, I can get from them what it is that they need so I can give it back to them so they can understand it. And I may not turn them into a space advocate where they run out and join the Space Frontier Foundation, but I have moved them from A to B, and at least it's a start. But this is what we do. This is what I have learned from this show. This is what happens when I meet people at Safeway, and I'm always on. There is no holiday from it if we believe in the dream, if we believe in space, if we believe that being spacefaring is a hell of a lot better for humanity than what we've got today. And I believe that. And I walk that and live it all the time. So I'm always on, even around friends of mine who, are not crazy about me doing it. And the other day, we came out and there was a line from the movie about Leonard Cohen. I don't know if any of you have seen this documentary. I totally recommend it. It's, another story. But there were people waiting in line, and they said, how is it? How is it? And we started talking to this couple, and it actually were some film people in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is not so unusual to run into. And everybody's telling what they do, and, what do you do? And I give them my card in the space show. And they all have space connections all. And all of a sudden, the dialogue is there to say why we should have space commerce. What this means to you, the graphic artist who does educational programming through cartoons and adult cartoons. That's what they did. They make adult cartoons for education in the Bay Area. And why they should possibly include space themes in their adult cartoons for education. And so we now have a dialogue. They live in Sebastopol, California, which is where I am, but this happens all the time. And so, what is that, 8 minutes left? So I listen to what people have to say very, very carefully. Being on the radio has taught me how to listen. Everyone except my girlfriend agrees with that. So, I can't comment on that any more than that. But they will give you the answer of what space is to them, is not. And from that, you can help connect the dots from them. But if you never ask them the question, if you just say we need to go to space for settlements, or we need to go to space for Mars, or we need to go to the moon because it's cool, coolness doesn't count. I mean, everybody loves coolness. We all love Hubble pictures on our desktop computers. We all love to see the rovers on Mars. But that's not opening space for the general public. We have much deeper to make it very personal. I have learned that they want personal. Make space apply to me. What is in it for me? Now, it may be really selfish. It may not be the model that we wish existed, but I have found it is far easier to make it personal and help them see something of value in it than it is to change their attitude and get off of the personal. I don't know how to do that one, but I do know how to make it personal and connect the dots for them on space. And I once delivered a talk similar to this about 5 years ago at the Mars Society. And I used in the example in the talk, saying we're going to Mars to save Earth from the big incoming, to save humanity. That really offended a lot of people in the room, because a lot of people, especially in our society, say that we go to Mars because that's how we're going to save humanity. It doesn't resonate out there. And, hopefully people in the Mars Society did understand that. I got a lot of people that came after me and said I changed their opinion. Just listen to people. Ask the connection. And realize that you're not talking to people like you're talking to the ones in this room. We have a space consciousness, a space state of awareness. The public is not the same. Even though the polls show they love NASA, we've got to make it personal now. So talk to them, ask them, listen really carefully. That's my message. And tell them how space benefits them in the ways that they want, in the ways that are important to them. And you know what? If you find someone that just doesn't work, learn that, so that the next time you run into someone, you can do that a little bit better with the next group of people. And, I think it's like you're always in a battle, one step at a time, one person at a time. It's a big world out there, but it's a big message, and it's an important message. And we're the ones who are best suited to deliver this message to the general population. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. A very informed talk. Next is perhaps the most unusual piece that we have, and that is Mizuzu Onuki, who captured worldwide media attention with a space fashion contest. Let's hear how she did it and what were the results. Mizuzu.
David. And first of all, I will show you the video of the world first fashion contest at the big space conference. It was held last October in Fukuoka at IAC. So, please. Start. I will introduce a few recent cases which appeal space tourism concept for the general public in Japan. I never aimed for these effects at the beginning. However, these projects have attracted a lot of general public and media attention as a result. So first, fashion in space. Art, all creative matters including fashion, can be enriched by the power of science and technology, and science and technology can become more understandable by the power of art. Artistic elements seem necessary to make people understand and put a charming essence on the message. This is my thought in my daily life working in a space development field. By the way, I'm not neither a scientist, an engineer, nor a creative artist. It has often happened that unexpected combinations invite wonderful chemical reactions. Fashion and space is one of them. So far, space has never met. All the astronauts wear the same Nomex suits and pleasured suits for lunch, and rugby shirts and shorts in orbit. However, thinking about airplane and cruise ship travel, people are very fashionable from the beginning of commercial services. They have created their fashion style even now. So now we have the start of this in space tourism. The Space Couture Design Contest for Space Tourism Wear has been going on since the last ISC 2005 in October. I think that this contest is a trigger to make young ladies attracted to space and space tourism. Most young women around these ages are not interested in space, even space tourism. This is obvious from research performed in Japan. However, actually, there are many young ladies who applied for this contest. This contest encouraged general public interest toward space tourism because so many media outlets deal with it, including women's magazine and magazine, which before have never covered space matters. I also have a plan to perform the first zero-G fashion show called Catwalk in Space in September. I look forward to seeing the beautiful scene floating the space wedding dress designed by Eri Matsui and the top 10 finalists of the contest wearing their designed space tourism clothes. By the way, the fashion industry, apparel only, has about 90 billion in sales in Japan. It is a wonderful breakthrough that space collaborates with such a huge industry. To compare, the entire lunch industry in the United States is about 3 billion a year. Fashion is not only clothes, but also jewelry, glasses, shoes, hairstyle, hats, and so on. All of these items are necessary for space tourism because individual expression and style are part of the personal choices people make when they choose to fly to space. One of the big new markets for space tourism is space wedding. We definitely need fashion essence for tourism. Wedding in space. Everyone all over the world think about a wedding as one of the most important events in their life. Both wedding ceremony and wedding trip are very special for every ethnic group in every country. For example, in Japan, 750,000 couples get married, and half of them have a wedding ceremony and a party per year. The current wedding market in Japan is worth 4 billion. I developed the idea of suborbital space wedding with rocket plane over the last year, and now we have the first customer for the charter flight signed up. They will be one of the first 5 funders flight for rocket plane, and then this special package of flight service will be available to everyone. Fashion in space matter makes space more fun to the general public because lots of vivid visual images come from this theme. Here, space tourism can appeal to people from another aspect from its charm. So next, space on our palm. As you know, Japanese are very, very fond of using mobile phone for mobile mail, web content, and commerce as well as talking on the phone. You can easily understand it when you see people in the trains and subways. People are very quiet because using mobile mail and web surfing and so on. It's different from the United States. We have lots of mobile functions, not only content such as music and game, but also commerce like credit card and prepaid cards. Also, we can watch TV on mobile phone. On the Star Festival, 7 July, the biggest mobile content development company has started to deal space tourism for sales in mobile shopping by point system coins. Also, this company has started a drawing for getting space tourism ticket as its campaign. This is the first case and new business model to get and to buy space tourism on the Palm. Space tourism can now reach on the Palm. This also is important because that you don't have to be millionaire to be able to fly to space. The mobile phone industry is 90 billion, though user number seems to reach the ceiling and it doesn't increase so much. Applications such as contents, commerce, advertisement are very innovative and rapidly depending. So I should conclude my presentation. So the last case is space tourism and space business. Rich people who want to go to space can have space travel. However, space is not only for rich people. In this point, skill game, space, prize award, survival type of TV program which can get space tourism are very innovative by the that space travel is always open to the general public. I have noticed that two types of people who want to go to space. One is just a passenger, and the other is people who want to begin to do some space business just after they book space travel. For those kind of people, there is a mission commander program who make reservation for a charter flight and do their own business by getting sponsors and missions. Furthermore, Mission Commander project trained following mission commanders and developed space business by using manned space vehicle. So, I should conclude. Actually, sponsorship project offered and some things have already come from the beginning of this project. Media likes this kind of story and can provide very favorable attention for these activities. Some media are always following them and filming. At the beginning of this month, and the same day on the Star Festival Day again, we established a new company named Astrax to do space business by using charter flight. Unfortunately, there is not a vehicle developer for space tourism in Japan so far. However, I'm sure we are capable user of space vehicle like airline companies using Boeing and Airbus. I believe when space meets something charming topic for mass media like fashion and mobile phone, there could happen a kind of chemical reaction. There will have a new vector and dynamics when the general public and media are interested in. Thank you very much.
We have to apologize to Mizuzu for the failure of the video. We can put a man on the moon, yada, 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 right? But we can't make these things work all the time. Okay, next up is Howard Bloom, scientist, writer, pop, publicity wizard, force of nature, and now space advocate, Howard Bloom.
First of all, Ms. Suzu was extremely courageous to continue her presentation through a total technical collapse. How we ever do get anybody into space is utterly beyond me. But one of the ways that we do is persistence, 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 even when things look terribly frightening. And Ms. Suzu showed persistence, 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 despite a scary situation. As for Dan and his impact on my life, I was turned on to space by Chesley Bonestell's illustrations and told the story the other day before you arrived over lunch. Well, by the time Star Trek came out in the early 1960s, it looked so primitive compared to the Chesley Bonestell illustrations that I grew up on that I looked down on the show, never watched it. And then one day, about 25 or 30 years later, when I hadn't been watching television for a long time, and certainly if it was going to be Star Trek, it was going to turn to another channel, I accidentally saw 10 minutes of Star Trek and went, oh my God, what the hell is this? Because unlike the terribly dry version of the original Star Trek, which was nowhere near Chesley Bonestell, all of a sudden the art direction had caught up with Chesley Bonestell and had gone beyond Chesley Bonestell. And I strongly suspect you may have had something to do with that. So really, when we're talking about the relationship between the media and the space program, we're talking about something that I preach a lot of time, which I call dream your ass off. It's imagination. I can try to boil down what we need to achieve in the mass media to give kids this vivid sense that I must get into space. If they stop the shuttle program, I will murder them all because they're taking away my hope. We've got to get kids to identify with Burt Rutan's machines, with X-Corps machines, with all kinds of other machines in this room. One of the messages that's been, but no matter what kind of list I've made, and I've been making little lists for you, because I'm a last-minute entree into this. I wasn't given time to really prepare any kind of a speech. The fact is that it's raw imagination. It's the unexpected that's going to take place. And what Ms. Suzy was just showing us was about 5 different forms of applications of imagination that would never have occurred to me. But when it comes to getting out to the media on a big scope, first of all, we do have to stop speaking to each other in the community. We don't have to stop talking to each other. What I mean is this. I have no idea what X-Corps does. This is the second convention I've attended in the space business, and I still haven't seen a picture of what X-Corps does. I've met heads of many fascinating sounding companies here, and because I haven't seen any pictures, I have no idea of what they do. I have no idea of what they have to offer me. And somehow getting the pictures out is extremely important. Getting them out in the forms of shows like Star Trek and Star Wars is very important. I thought that George Lucas was a maniac who had one good fluke going for him, and that was his first Star Wars movie. The first Star Wars movie was absolutely terrific and used a lot of animation techniques that none of us had ever seen before, and like seeing Dan's work for the first time, after seeing the original, far more primitive Star Trek, it made my eyeballs fall out. It was absolutely amazing. But then, when George started turning out a bunch of allegedly Star Wars movies that seemed to have no character and no plot, I thought the man was absolutely insane. He may not have been as insane as I thought, because my 15-year-old went out last week, bought or rented every single one of the, by now, I think 6 Star Trek, I get Star Trek and Star Wars mixed up all the time, Star Wars films, and decided to watch them in order. Not in the order in which I'd seen them, the order in which they'd been released, but the order in which they are numbered. And guess what? All those stupid movies in the middle with great special effects and no characters and no plot, Well, after he'd spent something like 7 or 8 hours watching these things from beginning to end, it turns out that these things actually do develop the characters and develop the plot. What does this have to do with imagination and dream your ass off? George Lucas came up with this totally wacko idea of putting together a bunch of interstitial stories that really didn't have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what he was doing was planting the seeds of surprise. Work with Prince. Prince would use the following effect. Prince is one of the most maniacal, astonishing, electric dancers you have ever seen in your life. If you've ever seen a Prince performance, it's beyond almost anybody else on the planet. But at a certain point in his performance during one of his tours, Prince would go down on the stage as if he was about to hump the stage. Well, we were all used to him humping the stage by that time. Masturbation had an awful lot to do with the words in his songs. And at first we thought this is part of the act, and then Prince didn't get up. And then we thought, oh my God, I wonder if Prince has just had a heart attack or an accident of some sort. And then Prince still didn't get up, and we go, oh my God, something is really wrong. Why haven't they rushed the stretchers up there? Maybe I should go running up to the front of the stage and help in some way. Finally, Prince took this so far that there's this thing that you go through when you're at a concert where you gradually lose your sense of individual identity, and all you really see is what's going on stage, and instead of feeling the people on either side of you as people who are judging you, for whom you are making each movement make you look the way you want to look, you begin to merge with the people. Well, that's called getting off. That's called getting the audience off when you reach that point. Prince was losing it. Prince was losing everything that a conference or a concert stood for. He was losing the magic. Everything was about to disappear, and all of a sudden, Prince bounced to his feet, just as we thought he'd lost good, and brought us back again. And that's the power of surprise, and that's the power of coming up with imaginative stuff. I've come up with a list of things of the sorts that we could try in the space movement to grab the public by the gonads and to get its imagination moving further and further in the direction of private space as well as NASA space. Because NASA space these days seems to be wasting an awful lot of its money, and private space seems to have promise of actually getting some interesting new things done. One example is, well, let's boil this down to stars, stories, and scores. In order to get something across, you generally have to pick a star and fixate the attention of the audience on that star. For example, I once had a band that was number 3 on the charts, and nobody in my company was paying any attention to it. They didn't want to work with it. This was back in the 70s. It was still very uncool for white people to work with black acts, and this was a black act. Nobody would work with them. I went out to the airport to pick up the manager of the band in a limousine and took advantage of the fact that we were stuck in New York traffic for 2 hours trying to fight our way back into Manhattan, and said, look, you have a female lead singer. This band prides itself on its democratic principles. Nobody's above anybody else. But if you cover my ass politically with the rest of the band and let me take the lead singer and focus all of the attention on her, I guarantee you that within a year we will have a star. And he covered my ass, and we focused on just one person instead of 4 or 5 people simultaneously. And the female star's name is Shaka Khan. So you have to focus on stars. If I were a television producer right now and I were asked to do a television series in some way would be gripping, compelling, have story, character, content, all the things that you need to make a show really work, I would do a fictional show on Burt Rutan, who is the most astonishing artist in aerospace. I mean, the planes he makes stun you. It isn't how they fly that stuns you, just even seeing one stuns you. And then when he goes and does something like gets the X Prize and actually shows that he can outdo NASA at a fraction of the price, there's a potential star in the making. Now, Burt is a cranky guy and has very strange aspects and stuff like that. He's a star. When you find stars, you have to focus attention on them. Scores. The Dow Jones Industrial Average comes out every day. What kind of publicity do you think this is for the stock market? If you had been the guy starting the Dow Jones, or if you had been the guy starting the stock market in the United States in the 1700s, and you had dreamed about how to get publicity would you have ever dreamed that you'd get publicity every single day? You probably wouldn't have. And yet the Dow is listed every single day. We have to come up with metrics in this industry that can be issued daily, weekly, or monthly. Let's just take, for example, the number of dollars that are being invested in private space efforts. If that's released on a weekly basis so that people can see it going up and down and it becomes a soap opera drama in their life, that brings private space into people's lives on a regular basis. Another variation on the same treatment is back in, I believe it was the 1920s or the 1930s, an anonymous publicist for a department store, of all things, was asked to come up, as publicists are asked every day, with an idea that would get publicity for this store. And he said, why don't we have a parade? Now, any of us in the room who know anything about the history of show business, and we're talking about the space industry as show business, it has to be business to capture people's imagination and hold onto that imagination. This guy said, why don't we have a parade? Well, P.T. Barnum had been doing parades 100 years earlier. A parade was nothing new. However, the interesting part of his idea was something very close to scores, and it was the idea of hooking the parade to a holiday that came around every single year, once a year. So you'd have an excuse to repeat this parade, and you could associate, like Pavlovian association, the name of the company with the parade. The holiday he picked was Thanksgiving. Now, none of you, and not even me, who tends to be a scholar in this sort of thing, none of us know who came up with this wild and ridiculous idea. But the wild and ridiculous idea is keeping Macy's in the headlines every year, long after the department store industry has become almost a dying industry. One of the things I'd like to see in this particular business, in the space field, is a Space Olympics. And I'd like to see kids not with standard robot kits doing robot battles. I'd like to see them coming up with autonomous intelligent machines of any form that they want, that crawl, walk, snake in any way they particularly want, and have their robots go head on head against each other with no restrictions, so that these kids could start coming up with, again, autonomous intelligences and things beyond even learning capability that we've ever imagined. I'd like to see kids making miniature rockets and going beyond rockets. I mean, we've had rockets since, we've had rockets for a very long time, but we've had rockets in space since Goddard, and it's time to get some new propulsion systems going. And it was very nice that NASA had an alternative propulsion program going for a while, and probably still does in a closet somewhere. But the fact is, give kids a chance to come up with prospective alternative propulsion things. Give them a chance to compete once a year or once every 4 years internationally with their ideas for alternative propulsion, and you're likely to get more alternative propulsion systems than you would get out of almost anything else in the world. The Space Olympics, okay. The big trick here, though, is going to be make pictures that are so fascinating that people cannot avoid them, create characters that are so fascinating, including characters on the real characters we've got in the business, like Burt Rutan, like Richard Branson, who has made himself a star over the course of the years by periodically trying to do absolutely outrageous things, like make it by balloon all the way around the world. Create characters, stars, and visuals, and create some metric system that gives you scores that people can follow, not just the way they follow the Dow Industrial Average, but the way they follow sports scores. Get those out on a regular basis, and we can get a lot more attention for new space. And show them, for God's sakes, what it is that each of the companies in this business is doing or trying to do. And that's it. That's it. Do you want me to introduce Rich for you? You don't have to look him up.
No, I'd like you to run the computer, actually. No. Again, thanks to Howard for giving us a real a mouthful in terms of images that can be used to boost the space image. And remember, this is somebody who has done this very successfully in the music industry. And now, Richard Godwin, with a very, in a way, similar but a different position now in the space industry. Richard is the editor of Apogee. I'm sure you all know what that is. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hello, folks. I didn't actually know that I was going to make a presentation until I got up here, so I made some some notes just to put across to you. One thing, I was having lunch with John Young. See, I'm name dropping already. John Young one day, and John said to me, I hope you all know who John Young is. He's the astronaut, right? John is the astronaut king, and he said, how come they can make the weather look so cool and interesting on the TV, but what we do looks so mundane? You know, and it's true. How many of you have been to a shuttle launch? I mean, up close and personal with a shuttle launch. A few of you, right? Does what you see on television do any justice to it? Absolutely not. Nothing. I was absolutely blown away by my first shuttle launch. I was there with my mother. Beautiful dark night. You could see the Milky Way, balmy night. My mum's standing there in the press stand about 3 miles away from the shuttle, and she goes, "We're too far away. We're not going to see anything." I said, "What do you think you're here to see? Shakespeare?" You know, it's wait. And when the shuttle leapt out of the ground like some demonic devil jumping out of Hades, she just went, "Oh my God!" You know, and then there's no sound. You realize there's no sound, and then all of a sudden the sound hits you, and it rolls over you, and then all the car alarms start going off around you. I mean, it's friggin' unbelievable. It blows you away. I took my son to a launch, and I've been trying to get him interested in space for a while, and he just said, "Dad, I see what you mean now. That was awesome." And this is the thing we have to get across to people. And I think, like Howard said, and I agree with Misuzu, that if you really want to get the population, you better talk to the women. I really believe that. You better talk to the women. Well, I lecture kids from like 2nd, 3rd grade right up to 12th grade. And I usually start with this question: how many of you don't want to go to space? And you see a few little hands go up. And it's usually the girls, 1 or 2 guys, but usually the girls. And I say, "Why don't you want to go to space?" And they go, "Well, it's dangerous, or it's scary." And I say, "Yeah, it is dangerous. It is dangerous. But let me tell you something. Do you know that girls make better astronauts than guys?" And they kind of go, "Huh?" And you start to explain to them why girls make better astronauts than guys. And I usually say things like, "Well, in space, you know how the guys have been telling you women all along for millions of years, or hundreds of thousands of years, you're not as strong as us, so you're not as good. Well, guess what? In space, anybody can lift a 10-ton truck. You know? What matters in space is up here. And women make better astronauts for several reasons, but one of them is that they have the same brain power for less body mass. They use less consumables. They're also susceptible to radiation damage, internal plumbing, that kind of thing. And when you start to get these ideas across, the girls are going, "Wow, cool." And they're looking at the boys, and the boys are going, you know? But it's that thing, and I think it's if you really want to populate space, send the women and let the guys follow them, because that's the way it's going to really work. So I think, the way I get around this, the way we're all been talking about talking to the choir, preaching to the choir, and I have a task in my life. If I can convince my mother-in-law that space is important, then I can convince anybody, because she just thinks that the weather changes when a space shuttle goes up. It's terrible. Have you noticed how the weather changes when they launch a space shuttle? It's like, we live in Chicago, But, and you try and explain all these different things, and I think that this is something we get across to the public. One of the things that I've been thinking about recently, and I recently approached NASA on to see if they were interested in it. I was at the World Space Congress a few years ago, and I was absolutely appalled when one of the major aerospace contractors didn't want to open on the public open day. Public open day was the Saturday, and they did not want to be open. They didn't want to talk to the public. They knew who their customer was. They didn't want to talk to the public. So they made us close down 4 hours early. I was so pissed off about that. There was kids in scout uniform outside, and school kids turned away. And I just thought, that is just so typical of this friggin' industry. And what I would like to see is like a World Space Fair, where every couple of years we get a big confab together, but it's for Joe Public. It's not for the techies and the engineers. It's for Joe Public to come in and see what space does for you every day. Do you know that most of you probably owe your lives to a spacecraft? You don't know that. I could explain it to you, but I can tell you that a lot of you wouldn't be here right now without spacecraft over the last 40, 50 years. And people just don't get it. They don't get it. Even you don't get that. But I can show you the history of it. And I think these are the things we have to start getting across. People are interested in survival. They're interested in money. And we have to try and get those things across to them and get just a little piece of it. And let them, they've got to understand that what we do is important. And we've got to try and explain to them why it's important. And that is it's not easy to do. It's not an easy thing to do. One of the things that I wanted to try and do at some of these confabs is to say, do you remember the apocryphal moment in your life when you first got turned on to space? I can remember it. I can see it in my mind now. I'm sat on the living room floor in England. I was 7 years old. And up on the TV in black and white comes Steve Zodiac, you know, on his little floating scooter, floating up to his spaceship, flying in the top of his spaceship, and he shoots off up a mountain and flies into space and goes to another planet. And I said, you can do that? Wow, how cool is that? And then like 3 months after that show started, John Glenn went up. And I was thinking, what is this? This is just fantastic and amazing and unbelievable. And I think that this tie-in between science fiction and science fact, they drive themselves so much. Robert Goddard was inspired by a book called, God, I just published it, I can't remember what it's called, Edison's Conquest of Mars. He writes in his memoirs 3 times about this book inspired him to go into the rocket business. And you can't begin to understand the amount of influence that people like Dan have on the up-and-coming generations of people. But let's try and make it so that people can see that it's not just fantasy, it's important. That we could really do a lot of this stuff. I know warp drive and phasers and stuff is a little bit difficult. Maybe it's NASA prize out for that one. But we should show people that there are things to do with space and the advance of our species that are so important to them. Maybe not just to them, but to their kids and their grandkids. That we have to try and get that across to them, and that is not an easy task to do. In terms of getting out to the public, sometimes what I do and where I've had the most effect in getting across to the public is just one line that's outrageous. And you would not believe the answers. When I used to run the watch for the foundation, I used to put out these press releases, and I put one line in one press release once that said, I am more, what did I say? I said something like, I have more information on this than the general public is able to see, and I am concerned. You would not believe the amount of people that phoned me from all over the world wanting to interview me because of that one statement. And some of the guys said, you shouldn't have said that. It was a little bit, that's a little bit going over the top. I said, no, how many people called me? I had, the drive-in into Johannesburg in South Africa. Can we call you tomorrow, please? We want to talk to you on the way into the town, And they thought I was a loony. And after I'd been speaking to him, he says, you're not really a loony, are you? You really believe this stuff, don't you? And I said, yeah, this is important. He says, well, we've got to worry about this, don't we? I said, yeah. I said, you're probably sitting on one of the biggest impact craters on the planet. I said, that's where you get most of your metals from. It's from a huge impact. And they didn't know that. And it's these little bits that you get across to people. I mean, the people in Vegas here called me up and said, what are the odds of getting hit? I said, how did I know you were going to say that, from Vegas? So, as I said, it's difficult to get across. If you imagine the internet, people think the internet. If you can imagine this room, every surface in this room, the floor, the walls, the ceilings, covered in postage stamps. I'll give you a little bit of idea of what the internet's about. How do you get your little postage stamp to stick out? And that's nothing compared to the real internet. Every web page is tiny. You have to get the links. You have to go out and constantly shout from the highest mountain all the time, every day, about your product. It's not easy. And it's not easy to do it with something that the people don't know that they need or even want. If it's something that the public don't need, but they think they want, usually okay, because you can keep shoveling that stuff at them day after day. I used to do it in the music business. I used to shovel stuff. I would sell so much of a record, and I go, I've sold something. I should listen to this. And I put it on. I go, what a load of crap, But it paid for a new house for me. So what do I care, What we do now, and that's one of the reasons I changed to spaces, because what we do now is I want to be involved in something that means something and does something to my kids, does something to educate people. got to get the kids involved as well. Getting the kids involved is the ultimate thing we have to do, because if all our kids become lawyers and accountants and bankers, and not that there's anything wrong with those, but if that's all we have, then you're going to be flying in Chinese or Indian jets in 20 years' time. And we're going to be selling plastic toys to them, but we're not really good at making plastic toys, so I don't know what we're going to sell to them. We have to make sure that the kids are on board, we have to educate them, we have to inspire them, and we have to move in that direction. I think inspiring the kids is the single most important thing that we have to do. Getting the message out about what we do to everybody, but we have to do it in a way that piques their interest and grabs their attention. Are you claustrophobic for having to only live on one planet? Ask them the question. Get your mother-in-laws involved. Check it out on your mother. You can get her to believe in it. Believe me, everyone will follow. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Well, that's what I call bat and cleanup, huh? All right. Go ahead. Just one moment. Chuck wants to say a few more.
For the fashion and space display that we have out in the exhibit hall, we're doing a vote. This is the first time we've done general public, what do you think and what would you like to wear? So there's a ballot out there on the table. It says my most favorite design is, and then write in a number. It's on the left-hand panel with the bigger ones with the gold numbers. So you write in my most favorite design is, my least favorite design is, and the quote is, I would not be caught dead wearing this on Earth or in space. And then put either your name or make up a secret code down below here, because there's a reward in this. The people that vote for the winner, we're going to tally them all up, and the winner, the most favorite one, everyone that votes for that person is going to get a rocket plane laser pen. So we want to get everybody to come out there, make your own personal ballot, and see which one you would want to wear, or since most of them are for women, what you want your wife or girlfriend to wear when you fly into space together. So in the break, go out there and please vote. Trying to see what the general public thinks about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. And please do check out the drawings if you haven't seen them already. I'm sure you've seen a little bit of them, but take a good close look at them. And this is what caught the media attention. All right. We just heard from Richard. Did a great job. Thank you very kindly, Richard. And in particular by bringing in the aspects of space, which there are too few of you guys here, and children as well, and mother-in-laws. I mean, that one was a new one on me, but it really made sense. So let's, now that we've heard from each of our distinguished panelists, I'd like to get a little discussion going between them. These guys represent a really different perspective. Each one of them comes from a different angle of vision. And we're talking about a really important idea in terms of how do we make the public more aware of new space. The engineering is incredibly important. The legal issues, the government issues, everybody knows this. But I think we've devoted far too little time and too little attention to how do we really get the public's attention and help them to understand this movement. There's a pervasive view, in my humble opinion, there's a pervasive view that we feel like if we just build the ships, that we put butts in seats really easily. Most other technological developments, the personal computer, the internet, many others, show that in fact, if you cannot find a way to translate this to the bulk of the population, there's a huge dip after the enthusiast and early adopter markets pass through. Some people in business theory call this crossing the chasm. And we've got to plan on crossing the chasm so that we make a smooth transition into bringing in the bulk of the population if we really want this idea of space migration to take place. So I've got a couple of questions here that I'd like to pose to our panel and let them discuss it, see if we can start a discussion about some of these important issues. Number one, despite the fact that numerous studies have shown tremendous interest in personal space travel, and despite the fact that all the major milestones of the new space movement have been carried by the major media, few stories are are explored or developed in depth, and most are shot through with inaccuracies. Little real research going on. In addition, it's not difficult to determine that few in the general public are really aware of the incredible agenda or nearness of happening of this movement, even among those who themselves profess a desire to go into space. That's the real puzzle. To what do you distinguished folks attribute this lack of legs in the media story, that single stories appear but do not get continued and developed and researched, and the seeming lack of response on the part of the general public? Anybody want to field that one to start with?
Well, let me start with that, because my background is basically half a century in science, but 20 years was the field trip into pop culture, and 15 years of that was running my own PR firm. And the lack of legs comes in part from the fact that in order to do good publicity, you have to be 3 times what the best journalist you know is. That is to say, you have to be capable of coming up with information that's 3 times as good as they can, 3 times richer than the information they can. You have to take it for granted that the press is going to screw up everything that they can. The press is a very lazy group of people in many, many cases, and there will be mistakes in any story that you do, and when you read your own quotes in a story about you, you will sometimes be startled to see what you didn't say. But if you've got a good publicist, and that publicist is developing new information about you day after day after day, and is capable of spotting the ways in which those new stories can be told with new hooks, you can eventually get the press into the habit of covering you on a regular basis and getting its stories straight because they get their information from you.
Howard, I know that a lot of the companies that I've talked to are not willing or feel that it's inappropriate to put money into publicity at this early stage. And yet it seems to me that unless we enlist the public at the early stage, there could well be this drop-off.
Well, one of the things that I did want to say while I was over in that spot was, now how does a scientist manage to get into pop culture? That's not easy. And one day somebody walked up to me and said, would you like to edit a magazine? And I didn't even ask what the magazine was about. I just automatically said yes, because it took me into pop culture. And it turned out to be a magazine about rock and roll, a form of music I had never listened to before. I listened to Bartok, Stravinsky, Beethoven, you know, Rachmaninoff, all of that kind of stuff. But what I discovered, first, David, in anything that you do in life, it doesn't matter that you're taking over a rock and roll magazine and you know nothing about rock. If you love your audience, if you're willing to love that audience and find out really wants and really needs more than anything else in life and give it to them on a regular basis, then you'll serve that audience very well. If you research your tail off, you'll serve that audience very well. And what did I discover in trying to get to the psyche of my audience? They wanted to know how someone like Alice Cooper, who was a big star at the moment, had gotten to be a big star. They really wanted to know Alice's story from the day he was, let's say, 13 years old or 12 years old and first became interested in rock and roll at all, to over the next 5 to 6 years, and how he climbed stair by stair by stair to where he was. Why? Because they needed to identify with him. They didn't want to see him as a distant figure on some distant platform they could never reach. They wanted to see him as being on that platform where all girls' eyes were, the attention of all the girls was on him, because there's an awful lot of sexuality in rock and roll desires, but including among girls who hunger for rock stars. But the fact they wanted to know, how can I do this? And they wanted to be able to identify. If we were doing, for example, the semi-fictional version of the Burt Rutan story as a weekly series on television, it would be very important to be able to flash back periodically to show you how Burt had his moment of epiphany at 5 years old that turned him onto space, what he did at the age of 10, what he was doing at 12, 15, and 16, to show you how he started out just like you, and you can be the next Burt Rutan. In fact, if one of you is not the next Burt Rutan, there won't be another Burt Rutan. Does that answer the question?
It certainly helps. It certainly helps. Okay. We're getting the sign here that we've got to come off because we've started so late that they don't want to back up the last session too long. So let me go to one last question, and that is, if you could add any one thing, this is for the whole panel, to the exhibit space media, put out either by the new space companies or organizations, what would it be?
Well,
A couple
he's
of
got the
moments,
answer.
each person.
Your annual event.
Yeah, as I briefly was saying about before, I think that a World Space Fair every couple of years, which got across to Joe Public, and everybody who was exhibiting at that fair would have to do one thing that showed the public why space is important, whether it be imaging, whether it be defense, whether it be weather, communications, something there to show people why it's important in their daily life. I think that the public doesn't really have a clue what goes on in space. They know that it's difficult. They know that rocket science means difficult, but they don't really know how much of an impact it has on their daily lives now, and how important it is, not just for the usual utilities and their cable television, but I mean how important it is, how much we rely on it, how much we rely on GPS, how before long they're going to get on a jetliner that better make sure that it gets its signal from that GPS satellite, otherwise you're going to die. You know, things like that. We have to get across to the public and show them how important that is. And I think, again, that would be aimed not just at mom and dad, but at the kids as well, so the kids suddenly go, wow, that's cool. I like that. You know.
But the other thing that you asked us was that this is Rich's idea. I wish I had come up with it. But that every single company that's displaying its materials at this annual fair or once every 4 years fair or whatever it is, the space fair, has to show you what it's doing. In other words, spaceplane, for example, has to show me a spaceplane and has to show me what it takes to make a spaceplane work. What in the world do you have to do to make sure that those rockets, once they go off, don't tear themselves straight off of the plane and tear the plane apart? What are your challenges? Show them to me so I can see them. Show them to me year after year as you develop, okay, here's my latest problem, here's the part that blew up, and here's what we designed to get past that. So I get to...
Presentation on Friday.
Aha!
Outreach. Think outreach all the time, day in, day out, talk to people.
And show and tell. Show and tell.
David, what do you think?
I think outreach is fine, but if you don't have the listening component in it, all it is a big lecture process. And you could get thousands of people coming to your outreach event, but if you don't know what's in their head and what space means to them and what their expectations are, it's a one-way communication, and that's not gotten us very far in 35 years. So outreach is great, and I'm a big supporter of it and a proponent of it, but somehow it's got to be a two-way street.
Very succinct, thank you. Ms. Uzu.
Thank you. So usually, there are so many opportunities for media to get to know government space activities, but very almost nothing, no opportunity to get to know new space movement, especially in Japan, because we have not so many new space activities. It's one reason. But the other reason is almost no opportunity to get to know each other. But I think media are very, very interested in this kind of new movement, not government activities. So, but another thing is new space and venture type company has no budget for publicity and public relations. So the only thing what I can do and what we venture company do is the best use of a kind of opportunities. And usually I try to invite media as much as opportunities, what I can do. So, for example, it's daily activities. So when we have some meetings and some drinking party at night or something, and every time I announce this kind of, even the small event, I announce the media person and get together and some discussion together. So I think this kind of grassroots type of event is also necessary to educate media.
Very good, thank you. Dan?
Well, it was touched upon earlier, and I think what's also important is finding a way to make it personal. And if the people, general public, are not aware of personal connection with what goes on in space, it will have no meaning for them whatsoever because it seems so out of reach and unattainable to them. So finding ways to, even with everyday objects, to make people aware of what space research has meant in their life. I mean, we wouldn't have these without the communicator on Star Trek. I think people are unaware how important miniaturization, medicine, and if stories are put out to, if somebody finds a cure for something that was only made possible because of research done in a zero gravity situation, let the public be aware of it. Make it a personal connection to as many people's lives as possible, and they'll be interested.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. Thank you, Dan. Well, you've heard some suggestions from some very brilliant people here about how to move the new space movement forward and taking into account the opportunities that the current form of media gives to us. Again, I would echo my basic idea about the use of simulation media, virtual reality, new media in general, in order to create a greater and more realistic experience for the public. Let them really visualize space in the way that we as children visualized space in the 60s and 70s. Those of us who were children then, right? And we're finished with the major section of our panel right now with the panel discussion. So let's have a hand for all of our participants. Now we've got one final little event here, which is really unusual. You've heard almost every person in this group pay homage to Star Trek. May I ask, just out of curiosity, how many Star Trek fans we have in the audience? We're preaching to the crowd, aren't we? Okay, well, we have a very unusual opportunity here. When Dan Curry flew in this morning just to do this event, he brought with him several of the original drawings used in the production of the field in the competition of Star Trek. These were drawings that were done. Dan, who did these right here?
Either John Eves or Duncan.
Okay, we've got the signatures on there. These are original pieces. These are not sold otherwise. These are very hard to come by. These are collector's items. We'd like to auction them off. We also have, and we'll show this in a moment, one large, full-size color picture of a Klingon showing part of the internal physiology of a Klingon. This is a very unusual piece done by Dan himself. It's stunning. And Richard here is going to conduct the auction for us.
How many of you would go on the website to auction to bid on these? Oh, eBay. Do it now. I mean, do you want these or don't you? You want them, you got to cut. You got many.
I'm sorry? Oh, that's a good idea. Anybody want to put it out in the other room that what we're doing here?
I got 3 more there, which I'm not going to auction. These are the nice ones. These are for the special people in this room, because you're all special.
These are beautiful pieces. Once you get them up close, you'll see
We've got
how incredibly detailed they are.
Klingon bird of prey here, which is just, it's exquisite.
Color pieces.
And
Why don't you step up to the mic?
this is the Shadows of P'Jem, scene 14. and it's 2 shuttles. I would think above. I think it was a Vulcan. Not Vulcan. Which city is it? I'm not sure which race it is. It looks like it. It was okay. So it's Vulcan. It's a cityscape. Pajam. It's called Scene 14, and it's got 2 shuttles over the top of it, again in color. And as David was saying, that this is not stuff you can buy normally. This is not stuff they put out. And so just...
Could you just briefly repeat for the people who just came in?
Okay, here we go. Anybody with money? Okay. These are 2 very special... They're 2 very special pieces of art that Dan brought in from the Star Trek studios. And these are not normally available. These are internally used for production decisions on how they want to make the spacecraft or the scene. So, first one, Shadows of Pajam, Scene 14, in color from Star Trek. Can I start the bidding? If anybody wants to come up and look at it closer, start the bidding at $50. Anybody at $50? Anybody? 50. Chuck? No, just this one.
Just this one, $50. Anybody who wants to come up and take a photo, please do.
Dan brought these directly from the studios. These are unique. There are not other copies of these.
Jeff.
I got $50. I got $50 over here. Can I hear a little bit more? Can I hear $75? Anybody going to give me $75 for this? $75 here, this gentleman here. $100 here. Now these guys have seen it. Now they're bidding. So come on, come on. They're bidding. Who wants to give me $125?
Any major card? We can take any
Any credit card. I got $100 right now. Got 110. Chuck over here. $110. 110. 125 there. The gentleman there. 125. Anybody else like to come and see this? This is unique, and it goes to the good cause because it goes to the teachers in space, so it's going to the best cause we can think of. 125. 150. Bill here. 150.
Is Dan still in the room? Dan.
Anybody else going to go? Give me 175. 175. 175, gentleman over there. Yeah, 175. 175. Yeah. Okay, 175. 200. Anybody give me 200?
Are these signed? Do they have names on them at least?
The artist's name is on it.
Okay.
The artist's name is on this as well. We've got $200 over here. $200, gentleman over here. Do I have 225? 225. 225. Gentleman there, 225. 225. Have I got 250? Anybody in the room 250? This is something you can frame, and you probably could sell it on eBay for a lot of money if you want to. But you know, I mean, this is unique. So we've got 225 down here. The gentleman down here, 225. Anybody else? 225. 225. Once, twice. Sold to the gentleman here. 225. Second one is the Klingon bird of prey. It's gorgeous. It's a very, very nice piece of artwork. Can I start this one at $100? Can I get $100 for the Klingon bird of prey? This unique piece of art. $100, anybody? $100? Anybody? 100? Over here. Over here. Kevin bids $100. Can I hear 125? 125. 125, gentlemen down in the front here, and they've seen it. Come on, you guys are looking this from the back. Come on, 125, 125. Here, 150, 150. Come on, let's see, 150. 150. Kevin over here, 150. There's only 2 of these going today. We've got 150. And here, 175. 175, gentlemen in the front here. 175. Can I hit 200? 200, anybody? Anybody? We've got 175 right now. Can I hit 100? 200 here. $200. $200 for the Klingon bird of prey. Can I hit 225? 225? 225, gentlemen in the front here. 225. Can I hit 250? 250. Can I hit 250? We're currently at 225. Can I hit 250? 250. Once. Twice. Sold. 225. This is really cool. We've got 2 of these, but we're only going to sell 1 today. I'm not sure. I think they're going to keep the other one maybe till next year, but check this out. A real Klingon, inside and out. And it's signed by Dan himself over here. This is one of his pieces. How unique are these, Dan?
This is we're going to do something where in the Klingon medical lab, we wanted to show the internal anatomy of a Klingon. Many years ago, I did medical illustration for a while, so I had to come up with something that conformed to issues mentioned in the script, like we've done in architecture, a certain number of ribs. So the only way we can squeeze that many ribs in. Oh, sure. The only way I could squeeze in the number of ribs is by making it a lattice. So, and it had to fit inside the body of a human actor. So this shows the accurate internal anatomy of a Klingon. And the original painting is oil on gator board. And so obviously this is a reproduction.
Very cool.
I'm sorry? It was never released. There was some legal issue at Paramount, so there are only a few floating around. I don't know how many there are.
There you go. Can we start at $1,000?
I signed it.
Dan has signed it as well, so you heard it from the man.
Yeah,
There's only a
it's
few of these floating
hand-signed
around.
right
It was
there.
never released.
Hand sign.
Yeah. It's the signature on the painting is here, and then I signed it with a Sharpie brush there.
Okay, so can we start the bidding on this incredible poster at $200? Will anybody give me $200 for the Klingon? 200. Bill Boland, 200. Anybody give me 250? $250. Come on, this is very rare. This is a rare one. It was not released. Paramount did not release this. This is something out of the inner archives. 257 right there. 250. Can I hear 3? 300. Bill Boland, 300. Can I hear 350? Anybody give me 350 for the Klingon? And if they want a special dedication, Dan is right here. He'll make a dedication to whoever actually gets to buy it. Ha ha. So can I hear 350? I've got Bill at the back here now with 300. Can I hear 350? 350, gentlemen in the front. 350. Can I hear 400? Can I hear a 400? There's not many of these about. This will go in pride of place in your office, maybe. Keep an eye on you while you're doing your work. 400. Bill at the back. Got 400 there. Can I hear 450? Can I hear a 450? Anybody? Can we hear 450 here? I've got a 400 right now. I've got $400 from Bill at the back now.
I will write a provenance also that says.
Dan will write a provenance as well, and you can have a picture with him, probably. You can get a picture and write in the provenance. So we've got a provenance as well here. We get a picture, we get a provenance, you got the whole thing going here. Can I hear $1,000? I got $400. I got Bill at the back with $400 right now. Come on, we've got teachers in space to send up. We've got teachers to send. Can I hear 450? Can I hear 450? Can I hear 425? 425, I got 400 right now. I got 400. Once, twice. Sold to Mr. Boland, $400. That's it, folks. Thank you very much.
It's the larceny. Yeah, I want to see all this. I want to really see lots and lots of interest that will come in. I think that we should start advertising the auction to the public. And I think that I think people will come.
We actually did talk about doing that as we were planning the conference. It just turned. Yeah, Yeah, I agree. It just required more work than we were able to do in the short time that we had, but we did think about that.